everyone, it's Katrina. The Antarctic world. Scientists from NASA were left shocked after capturing snapshots of an unexpected creature living 600 feet underneath the ice in Antarctica. The team of scientists drilled deep into the West Antarctic ice sheet and discovered a small shrimpy creature showing off for the researchers. When they lowered a special camera into the hole and videotaped what they saw, the creatures looked like dancing shrimp. Bob Beinschadler from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center was one of the people involved in the expedition. He said the team acted like a bunch of kids when they found the animal. They were gathered around the camera while the tiny shrimp creature gave them a show. Scientists had anticipated a cold, empty hole in the ice without any life forms. But as it turned out, there are all kinds of creatures living underneath Antarctica. The tiny critter seen by researchers in this case was an amphipod that measured about 3 inches long. The discovery below the ice was made in the 2010s, and since then, scientists have found a whole lot more. A secret ecosystem was identified 1,000 feet deeper by researchers in 2022. For the first time in human history, scientists drilled approximately 1,640 feet below the surface of Antarctica's Larsen ice shelf and spied on a hidden world. During the earlier expedition, scientists found one shrimp, but this time, scientists broke through the ice and saw swarms of thousands of shrimp-like creatures, and they too are amphipods. A big thing that's changed is that researchers believe there are vast networks of rivers and lakes beneath the ice, which could hold even weirder animals that scientists have never seen before. The mammoth autopsy. A woolly mammoth was found frozen in Siberia, and afterwards scientists gave it a full animal autopsy. The autopsy revealed new information about the mysterious Ice Age beast. It also gave researchers new biological samples of blood and tissue that could be used to clone the animal. Researchers have nicknamed the preserved mammoth Buttercup. She was found buried in the ice on Maley Lyakovsky Island, still fermenting in her own blood. It looked like the creature died, bled out, and then her blood and body were frozen together. The autopsy took about a week, with scientists having to defrost the creature in stages. Scientists said as the procedure continued and the mammoth warmed up, the smell of her carcass got more and more horrifying. Tori Harridge from the Natural History Museum in London said it stank of rotting meat and rotting milk. The smell was absolutely atrocious. But the information gained was priceless. Analyzing the teeth revealed that the mammoth died in her 50s. Then researchers examined her tusks and discovered that Buttercup had given birth to at least 8 calves over her lifetime. And in her liver, they found strange white spheres about the size of golf balls that Harridge believes were likely gallstones. There were also large rocks found in her intestines, which were likely swallowed while she was grazing. All these things put together point to the beast having been sick shortly before her death. However, Buttercup's demise came when she got stuck in a peat bog. Missing meat from her thigh, a missing chunk of spine, and a missing piece of skull suggest she was partially eaten alive by predators while stuck in the bog. And as for the whole cloning thing, researchers are closer than ever. With pieces of flesh and blood from the frozen corpse, scientists are hoping to bring the woolly mammoths back from the grave. It's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Mountain Life for the generous super thanks. Thank you so much, and it really means a lot. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Icemans Clothes. A man fled into the European Alps 5,300 years before today. He was likely fleeing someone with really good aim. His body was discovered by hikers in the Otzal Alps on the border of Austria and Italy on September 19, 1991. A couple of German tourists found one of the very few examples in the world of a real frozen caveman. They thought he was a dead mountaineer, but that turned out not to be the case. In the last 30 years, scientists have tried desperately to reveal the particulars of the Iceman's life and death. An arrowhead found embedded in his left shoulder, along with some other wounds, suggests he was fleeing an attack. Otzi the Iceman may have had no choice but to escape through the high mountain pass, though it would turn into his final resting place. There have been a lot of studies about Otzi's body, diet, and life. But the one thing that's always eluded researchers is the truth behind his clothing. Scientists have struggled to identify the source of the leather used to fashion his clothes. But now, scientists have employed new technology to amplify the mitochondrial DNA from his preserved rags. The new technology revealed that his leggings were made from goat hide, his loincloth was made from sheepskin, and his coat was made from a mix of goat and sheep. So, to make up his outfit, it required the skin of at least 4 different sheep and 2 different goats. But Otzi had some other great gear too. His shoelaces were made from cattle, almost identical to the process used currently to make modern leather hiking boot laces. The quiver of his bow was crafted from roe deer, but it was his hat that Otzi was undoubtedly the proudest of. Scientists were amazed to find that his hat came from the flesh and fur of a huge brown bear. Nobody knows who made the clothing. Did the Iceman kill the bear and make the hat himself? And if so, why didn't he make a bear fur jacket to stay warm in the cold? He may have traded the hat for something, but it's impossible to say. When Otzi died, he was also in possession of a simple copper axe, a woven grass backpack, and containers made from birch bark. The mummified bear. Speaking of ancient bears, one was recently discovered in the Siberian permafrost. In 2020, researchers acquired a perfectly preserved bear that had been mummified in the ice for an extremely long time. At first, scientists with the Yuka Mammoth Museum Laboratory in Yakutsk thought the mummy belonged to an extinct cave bear, Ursus spelaeus. It was closely related to modern brown bears and modern polar bears, only significantly more ferocious. They could stand 11.5 feet tall and they weighed nearly 3,500 pounds. The last cave bear died roughly 22,000 years ago, so researchers figured the mummy was at least that old. That didn't turn out to be the case though, not even close. Over the last 3 years of analysis, the truth about the bear came out, much to everyone's disappointment. The bear is modern. It only died 3,500 years ago. When the bear perished, Otzi the Iceman had already been stuck in a block of ice up in the Alps for 2,000 years. But it's still a cool discovery, even if it isn't ancient. This was a female bear who only stood a little over 5 feet tall and weighed 172 pounds. That's about 3,200 pounds lighter than the biggest cave bear, and that should give you an idea of how hugely monstrous the extinct cave creatures were. Researchers still aren't sure how the bear died, but they think it likely had something to do with a spinal injury. Its stomach contents were still partially intact, showing the last few things the bear ate. It was living on a diet of unidentified plants and random birds. Scientists also found whole feathers in its guts. Zombie viruses. It's hard to imagine 2 words worse to combine than zombie and virus, yet in the rapidly melting ice sheets of the world, zombie viruses are freeing themselves from their icy prisons. Locked in Arctic soils and at the bottoms of frozen riverbeds, there are uncountable ancient microbes. I'm talking about bacteria and viruses that were around thousands of years before much of the northern hemisphere was trapped in ice. But now, warming temperatures are causing zombie viruses to be unleashed. Computational biologist Jean-Michel Claverie said the risk is only going to increase with time. It will increase with global warming and with more humans moving into Arctic regions. Claverie also said scientists are purposely not isolating any virus that could potentially infect a modern mammal. The thing about these viruses is that they all pretty much have the same properties, being nothing but idle particles stuck in the ice. But once they get inside a host, they start wreaking havoc. Scientists don't want to isolate any of the potentially dangerous zombie viruses because they could start a new global pandemic. Even if scientists don't want to study them though, they can't help but find them. Scientists recently discovered something called Pithovirus sibericum, one of the biggest viruses in the world. It's roughly 1.5 micrometers long, and that makes it a giant virus with double-stranded DNA. It's so big that you can see the structure of the virus using a basic microscope, or if you have really good eyes. P. sibericum was discovered by scientists inside a permafrost core, extracted in the Russian Far East. This particular virus is harmless to humans, but it's a great example of how strange zombie viruses can be. Frof Nansen. One of the first great Arctic explorers was Frof Nansen from Norway. He was born in October 1861 on a simple farm in Oslo. He spent his youth outdoors, playing on the ice and enjoying sports. He won the Norwegian Championship for cross-country skiing almost 12 times. He was a big fan of the ice and of the adventure, and he even had his own cabin by a lake, surviving in the wild like a caveman. In 1882, Nansen joined the crew of a ship named Viking, which was on its way to hunt seals in the North Sea. Nansen didn't want to hunt seals, but he did want to learn more about life in the frigid sea. During the journey, the vessel became stuck in the ice for 24 days. It was Nansen's first journey to the Arctic, and his first time stuck in the ice. It was a humbling experience, one that motivated the young man to continue his travels. In 1888, Frof Nansen crossed Greenland on a pair of skis. It was a difficult experience, as you can imagine, with the crew of 6 men suffering through temperatures that dipped to around minus 49 degrees Fahrenheit. They slept with 3 men in a single sleeping bag to try and stay warm. Most of the food they ate was pemmican, a mixture of dried meat and tallow, but pemmican lacked the sufficient amount of fat the men required, so they'd eat pure butter to quench their cravings. The trip took 50 days, but the group successfully completed one of the most brutal ice crossings in history. They were the first people to cross Greenland's interior on land. But it was his Fram expedition that really propelled Nansen to fame. In late June 1893, Nansen and his carefully selected crew departed Norway on a ship named Fram. The ship was built specifically to be the strongest vessel ever sent on a polar expedition. The explorer wanted to be the first man to reach the North Pole. He believed there was a current that could take him there if he could only design a special ship to survive the ice. And that was where the Fram came in, designed to keep everyone alive when they undoubtedly got stuck in the ice. Nansen never did reach the North Pole, though he did get closer than any human before him. He chose to abandon Fram and go in search of the North Pole with a few meager supplies, a kayak, and some dogs. But he and his companion, Johansen, were discovered by an English expedition hiding in a makeshift hut 3 years after they set out to find the pole in June 1896. But that wasn't the end for Nansen. He did many great things with his life. He was a pioneer in neuroscience and oceanography, and in the last decade of his life, he devoted himself to helping refugees and people who were displaced during World War I. He was quite the explorer and hero. Ice Age Hunters of the Holy Land. A team of scientists from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem recently analyzed tens of thousands of bones that were found at a camp that was used 23,000 years ago by Ice Age hunters. The camp isn't currently on the ice, but it was a very long time ago. The site is called Ohalo 2, and it's located at the edge of the Sea of Galilee. The camp was occupied for about 1,000 years during the Ice Age. Jerusalem might be a hot place now, scorched under the brutal sun. But that wasn't always the case. During the last glacial maximum, huge ice sheets covered most of North America, Northern Europe, and Northern Asia. Even the parts that weren't completely frozen were extremely cold and dry, just like the prehistoric Holy Land. At Ohalo 2, scientists found the grave of an adult man, a garbage heap, an old hearth, and some flint tools. Add to that about 22,000 discarded animal bones from creatures like gazelles and foxes. The sheer number of bones seems to suggest that Ice Age Galileans thrived in the chilly environment. Scientists think this could change everything they know about prehistoric humans in the Ice Age. The traditional view of humans struggling and starving in the cold might need to be re-evaluated. These discoveries prove that human beings had a great time in the cold as they were hunting, evolving, and building the oldest ice. Geologist Jaakko Putkonen from the University of North Dakota has what might be the oldest piece of ice ever found in his freezer. Not in his personal freezer, of course, but in the commercial freezer at the Energy and Environmental Research Center on campus. It was collected in 2018 during an expedition to the Ong Valley of Antarctica. It's not 100% confirmed, but the data does seem to suggest that this small chunk of ice is 5 million years old. But how does one even go about dating ice? To date the ice, you first have to melt it. The scientists at the university were able to melt the ice and then date the dirt and sand particles that came out of it. Quartz crystals were removed and analyzed, and isotopes were dated. Amazingly, that data shows the ice formed 5 million years ago. It's highly unlikely to be the oldest ice in the world, though. Scientists think there could be even older ice in Antarctica from 8 million years ago. These ancient pieces of ice are supremely important to scientists because they act as time machines. To understand the past, researchers can analyze the ancient pieces of ice. They can look at gases trapped within the ice, which shows what the climate was like at the time the ice formed. Understanding the behavior of glaciers and primeval ice can help humans prepare for the future in a world of rising temperatures and an uncertain climate. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Marine reptiles. In Chile, there is an enormous glacier that is beginning to melt, revealing a prehistoric monster. Actually, so far, scientists have uncovered 46 different animal remains belonging to 4 different species of ichthyosaur. These were large and fast marine reptiles that lived during the Mesozoic era from 245 to 90 million years ago. Ichthyosaurs breathed air and gave birth to live young. They ranged anywhere from a few feet to almost the size of a blue whale. The skeletons discovered in the glacier ranged from adults to females with embryos that were likely killed during mudslides while they were hunting in a canyon. Mud flows would fall like an avalanche, drowning and disorienting the ichthyosaurs. They were preserved in deep-sea sediments and then later exposed by the melting glacier. The largest one found measures over 16 feet in length. Some were so well preserved that they even have soft tissue. This graveyard beneath the glacier is a treasure trove of information, helping us to learn more about these ancient reptiles. Frozen alligators. On a freezing morning in January, George Howard thought the lumps sticking out of the iced-over swamp were tree stumps. Turns out that these stumps at the Swamp Park Alligator Preserve in North Carolina were actually his alligators. At first, he panicked. Were they all dead? He was supposed to be taking care of them. How could he let this happen? Besides the ethical quandary, he also panicked over the financial consequences. How are they supposed to recover from this? The alligator snouts were locked in the ice and they were not moving. So before taking a pick to the ice, he quickly Googled alligators in ice. He was flooded with relief. They weren't dead. He discovered that his fears were unwarranted. Gators do this all the time. This is their way of making it through the winter months when their habitats often freeze over. It was cold last year, and the swamp waters kept freezing and thawing over and over. The gators in Swamp Park kept pushing their snouts through the frozen layer of ice, staying immobile with their snouts stuck like a breathing tube. As it turns out, alligators prepare for these freezing temperatures pretty successfully. As the temperature drops, these creatures hang out in shallow waters and poke their noses in the air to craft a breathing zone. After enough time, the water solidifies and the gators get locked into their spots while they just hang out below. They basically turn off their metabolism, and since they don't use energy, they don't need to eat. Scientists in 1990 observed a group of alligators doing this behavior and discovered that baby alligators do not know how to do it. The little ones have to learn it from their parents, so other species in warmer areas might not know how to do this either. Strangely enough, no one has a solid explanation for how gators developed this behavior, other than to say it's an evolutionary adaptation. But since gators have been around millions of years, they must have been doing this for a long time. St. Joseph's Lighthouse. During the winter months, Lake Michigan can get pretty cold, and when snowstorms start to batter the area, many of its lighthouses wear their ice for quite a long time. That's what makes St. Joseph's Lighthouse such a wonder to see during the winter. Many of the lighthouses on Lake Michigan, like St. Joseph, can develop a wonderful blanket of ice on their exteriors, which drives environmental lovers to come to the area and see what all the fuss is about. For example, Tom Gill goes to see these lighthouses regularly. There are beautiful layers of ice that form on and around these lighthouses, giving way to long icicles that seem to tower into the sky, making them appear as if they're ice castles meant for a queen. However, this only happens under very strict conditions. It needs to be cold, but the water around can't be completely frozen. Then the wind needs to be pretty strong. That's what throws layer upon layer of new water on the lighthouse, which in turn freezes. In fact, you can determine which way the wind is blowing by looking at the direction of the icicles that form on the lighthouse. St. Joseph's Lighthouse is located in a position that puts it into contact with tons of waves, meaning that it develops a truly wondrous blanket of ice over its entire exterior. If you're ever in the area, you should definitely check these out for yourself. Have you ever seen a frozen lighthouse? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Iron Age artifacts. In 2020, a group of Norwegian archaeologists started finding artifacts from the Vikings and the Iron Age frozen inside of one of the melting glaciers in the Jotunheim Mountains. In Norway, just like the rest of the world, a lot of glaciers are quickly melting. However, alongside this somber course of events have come new discoveries about our past. They first came across a long-lost trade route from the Viking era in 2011, but due to the thawing glacial ice, they've been discovering more and more artifacts in the area. Given the speed at which the glaciers are melting, these scientists really wanted to find and collect these artifacts as fast as possible so they don't get damaged. The same thing that's happening in Siberia with frozen animals from the Ice Age, and they've definitely been rewarded for their efforts. Since these artifacts were frozen in ice, they've been remarkably well preserved. They've found hundreds of artifacts in the area, including shoes, wool, sleds, knives, and horseshoes. When I say well preserved, I mean it. You could even wear one of these shoes or a garment made by Vikings, though of course you shouldn't since they are relics. But if you did, I don't think that anybody would know that they were that old. Why is there so much stuff in the area? The horseshoes indicate that the area was probably a road, a highway for traveling Vikings, likely on trading expeditions. By dating many of the artifacts that they've discovered, researchers suggest that while the road was once immensely popular, it probably lost some steam when the Black Plague hit Europe in the 1300s. Sadly, the glacier is melting far more than it ever has before. It's even eliminating the original ground where the Vikings likely traveled. This situation is definitely a win-lose. You can find important elements of our history like these, but on the other hand, we are losing significant amounts of ice. Nowhere is it more apparent than in the areas that were once frozen and are thawing at a very fast rate. The Yuka Mammoth. The Yuka Mammoth is one of the most well-known and scientifically valuable animals that have ever been found. It was discovered in 2010 within the Siberian permafrost on the coast of the Laptev Sea in Russia. The most unusual thing about this 39,000-year-old mammoth was that it was mummified and had the most intact mammoth brain ever found, with folds and blood vessels still visible. Finding specimens like this is incredibly helpful to understanding the species. Studies of the brain showed it to be very similar to modern-day elephants, and also led to researchers developing better ways of storing mammoths in the future when new ones are found. Along with the Yuka mammoth, a number of other ones have been found in the region, although not in as good condition, and have been highly sought after by researchers for a different purpose. Because of their relatively intact DNA and their status as an intriguing extinct animal that is very similar to some that exist today, the mammoth is a great candidate for bringing a species back from extinction using cutting-edge technology. It's believed that with a bit of luck and perseverance, we might once again see these giants alive and well, and maybe within just a few years. Would you want to see that? Let me know in the comments below. Ancient Alaskan forest. Did you know there's a forest in Alaska that's been hidden for over 1,000 years? Again, due to melting glaciers, this once well-concealed forest is coming back into view. As the Mendenhall Glacier has been melting for the past 50 years or so, it's revealed the occasional log. But recently, it's been tree after tree, many of them somewhat intact. That's when people realized that they might have found a completely hidden forest. Scientists are not yet positive what kinds of trees they are, but hemlock and spruce trees grow in the area and are about the same size, so that's what they think is there right now. But they're still on the prowl to find out more. How did a forest grow inside of a glacier? Researchers think that it likely started about 1,000 years ago when the glacier was growing bigger and bigger. As glaciers grow, they spit out layers of gravel, and this forest likely got caught in one of those gravel emissions. Then the glacier just kept moving forward, freezing the forest in time. As it turns out, the Mendenhall Glacier is melting at a terrifying rate of around 170 feet per year, and that trend doesn't seem to be letting up anytime soon. This isn't a very good sign for the Earth in general, but it's definitely interesting to know that there is a forest trapped underneath glacial ice, and that there might even be many more. Hopefully, we'll be able to find out more about this ancient forest in the coming years. 46,000-year-old bird. Scientists recently found the remains of a bird which they've dated to be somewhere around 46,000 years old. Now, things can obviously last a long time in ice, but 46,000 years? That's quite impressive, right? That amount of time puts this bird back in the last ice age at least, but Siberia is cold enough that its permafrost is pretty well able to preserve everything locked underneath its soil. Lövdalen, a genetics professor at Stockholm Center for Paleogenetics and one of the 3 men who were present at the bird's discovery, claimed that the bird seemed like it had died just a few days ago. You'd think that bacteria or scavengers would have gotten to its body after it died, but they didn't, so scientists were pretty excited. A find like this is extremely useful because it is the first almost totally undamaged bird from that age. They were lucky to find this bird in this state because being so small, it could have disintegrated quickly or it could have been easy prey for another animal, but it was not. So it seems that this little animal has a lot to tell us about its history. To put this in perspective, you have to imagine this bird flying around with woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats. Through sequencing its DNA, researchers were able to determine that this bird was a horned lark. Those birds split into 2 different subspecies at some point in time, and this bird helped scientists understand how a brand new species of horned lark could have formed in virtue of the changing climate at the time. André's balloon expedition. The North Pole was the crown jewel for many explorers in the past, but it was a treacherous journey regardless of your method of travel. Despite this, in 1897, a group of 3 Swedish explorers put their brains together and figured that getting there would be easier if they traveled via hot air balloon. S.A. André and his team set out to do the impossible, and it didn't go very well. Now remembered as the Arctic Balloon Expedition, they planned to make history, but the whole thing was reminiscent of Don Quixote, the sort of idealistic journey undertaken without the proper preparation based on pure romanticism. In July 1897, the 3 left from Svalbard, but they were ill-equipped for what would come next. Apparently, they hadn't planned for the trip effectively, and André made them use a drag rope method to steer the vessel, which weighed the ship down. After a mere couple of days, the balloon had depleted its helium and fell to the ground. After that, they were stuck. The elements consumed them and they were frozen in the ice. For years, no one knew what had happened to them. Then in 1930, explorers found the remains of their camp, along with the expedition members and diaries, cameras, and film all frozen. Incredibly, 93 photographs were saved. You can see the eerie photos of the doomed expedition with the small team putting the balloon together, setting up camp, and hunting polar bears. Worms. Just imagine being in a state of a coma for 42,000 years and then waking up again. I know it looks like something out of a movie, but it's not far from the truth. A group of nematodes, which are parasites that hang out in the soil, were recently brought back to life after an astonishing 42,000 years frozen in ice. We all may be a little bit groggy after we wake up in the morning, but one can only imagine how these nematodes must have felt when they emerged back to life. These worms were found in the melting Siberian permafrost, which is releasing a ton of hidden treasures back into the world. When scientists working in the area came upon the worms, they decided that they'd try to bring them back to life, because why not? That's the kind of thing a mad scientist would do, don't you think? Anyway, they were able to bring 2 of these species back to life. This is the first time that any evidence has been gathered that multicellular organisms can come back to life after unthawing after so many years. Maybe tardigrades, but we haven't found any that old yet. Nematodes are very little. Usually they're only about 1 millimeter long. However, they can live around 1 kilometer below the ground, which signals their amazing resilience. They are also known to adapt to their environments very well. Depending on where they live, they can grow different types of mouths. Viruses have also been seen to pop back to life after unthawing from the Siberian permafrost, but nematodes are the first time an organism this complicated has ever been able to do so. That is quite an achievement, and much better than a virus. Allen Hills 84001. Allen Hills 84001, or ALH, is a meteorite which was discovered by a team of meteorite hunters in the Antarctic ice in 1984. From the outside, it doesn't look like much. It's a little over 3.5 pounds, and it looks more like a weird brick than anything from out of this world. Like all other meteorites, it had a thick layer of glass known as a fusion crust, which all meteorites share on their exteriors. It's the sign that they've burnt up while passing through our atmosphere. They also thought it probably came from a volcano on Mars a long time ago. In the years since it was discovered, ALH has turned into something of a phenomenon. A group of researchers in 1996 suggested that the microbial fossils inside of ALH could point to the existence of ancient life on Mars. ALH contained so-called magnetite particles, which as far as scientists knew, never occur outside of biological contexts. Because of this, ALH might point to life outside of Earth. However, like with any big purported breakthrough, there were skeptics. The fossils that were found in the specimen might have been the after effect of evaluation by electron microscopes, and the molecules inside of ALH could possibly have formed regardless of microbes on Mars. But the magnetite particles are still unexplained, so who knows? Maybe ALH does indeed indicate that there's more to life than we know about. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching! Have you ever found anything weird frozen in ice? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!